Welcome everyone to session 6, which we've entitled All the Bottom Lines. So many of you as a congregation are asking, what does success look like? And I think, Graham, within that we get maybe stuck a little bit with looking at success in terms of what's worked in the past. So that can mean, how do we get young families back in the church? And
Sunday attendance.
How do we increase the budget? How do we get more volunteers? I hear that a lot. And we're looking at success through the lens of church questions.
That's it.
What if we actually switch that and turn that out to neighborhood or community questions? What could impact or success look like if we did that?
And this is a great example of how complicated your conversations on your church board can become.
Yeah.
Because everybody comes with a different version of just what Dave said in a few moments. Some folks are looking at the classic church bottom lines. Others are looking at perhaps the housing development or community hub options that we've discussed, and they're saying, if we did all of that, what would we get at the end of the day?
Yes.
Maybe they say we get $100,000 a year in recurring revenue from the operation of the community hub or of the housing, right? Now we start getting.
And I think what people are wanting is, how much money am I going to get?
Yeah.
And this is the one we get all the time, is if we do this, will more people start coming back on Sunday?
That's it. So they're tying the two bottom lines
together.
They're
tying the two bottom lines going, can we give people money? And I just think there's more imagination if we ask some different questions.
But again, and you can even hear us just jam in on this, this is the way this part of the conversation goes. If it happens well, and that's what we are trying to lead you to, and what will be a fairly short session today, we want you to be able to grapple with the bottom lines that you individually have come with. And we're thinking of this as a conversation perhaps with your son or your daughter or your best friend who says to you, hey Jeff, hey Jane, I heard you were involved in the transformation of that church. What did you get out of that? What was the whole point?
Right.
Why did you do it? So you're thinking of answering that question. And we want to give you some of sample ideas of bottom lines. And we want you to begin writing those down now, because at the end of this session, we're going to ask you to be very honest with the colleagues on your board of what those bottom lines are for you, what they are for them, and begin to see the conflicts, which we know are the number one ways that your project will get derailed. It's the way in which you will come into conflict with your partners, your suppliers, your investors, your neighbors, and each other.
Yeah.
This is, in a sense, the most important thing to get right. So
here are just a few bottom lines I think we really need to consider. And then, Graham, I know you're going to get into some of the crazier ones, which, again, I love about us, is we're going to start with here are ones I hopefully we're thinking about. The bottom line of social. So there is this community, social. How is what we're creating engaging our neighborhood and our community in really impactful ways?
So this is, are we helping the most vulnerable? Are we helping those who've been excluded? When we look at issues of homelessness, food security, are we making a difference? The classic definitions of social impact.
Then there's financial. So we don't want to ignore that. Obviously, it is an important bottom line. It's not the only, but it is important. We got to make sure that, are we getting back the return of investment, whether it be on the land value or whether it be on a community hub project? So we do need financial.
And there's an accountant listening to this session right now,
right,
who doesn't like this conversation already, because they're saying there is only one bottom line, and it is financial, and that's it, right? And we fully respect that, and there are many reasons why you're right.
It's important.
We're trying to help you explore the way in which people understand these bottom lines. What's next?
Another one is environmental. So are we lowering our environmental footprint, zero carbon? Like, there's lots of ways in which we can think about our buildings, especially. And again, old church buildings, where you have, again, more hot air or cold air going out of the building than keeping in it. There's siphon out. You have...
So carbon footprint, reduction of greenhouse gases.
Yes.
These are key environmental measures. We see them in all kinds of building assessments. We see them in the E of ESG investing. We see them in some interventions on faith properties, which we entirely applaud. We want to help you, however, see those bottom lines in conjunction with the others. So, for instance, putting in a ground source heat pump or putting on solar panels. These are very important, wonderful things to do, unless you have a $200,000 a year deficit and you're eating your $1 million of savings down. these bottom lines already you can see are going together? What's
I think another way the environmental one is significant is often you have a congregation of 30 meeting in a space that seats 700. Your footprint is massive compared to what you actually need.
This is the easy shorthand, and here's one of our disclaimers. You have them in every session. We are not environmental engineers. You can talk to one. But the easiest way to improve the environmental performance of, let's say, a heritage church building like the one Dave just described is use it all the time.
That's
Even if you don't change the heating system.
Just get people in it.
Get people in it. This is the community hub argument, which we've gone through. What's next?
Last one that I have on my list is spiritual. And I think that's something that we don't want to ignore. Again, you are here representing a church, and there is a spiritual impact or success measurement that you want back. But I think what happens is when we think of the spiritual impact or the spiritual bottom line, we often think about budget and butts in the seat. And I think we need to shift that. And there's a reimagining in how we view who the church is in the community. And what does a spiritual impact actually look like? And I think that's something that we need to wrestle with.
So this now gets into the qualitative and quantitative measures for each of the bottom lines. You could say bottom line means quantitative. Usually we find the qualities of those impacts are also quite important to church boards. When it comes to spiritual impact, again, we have the classics: church attendance, baptisms,
Right.
adult education courses.
Yep.
If we ask then the question, how effective were those adult education courses?
Right.
How convinced are we that the people who were baptized really are doing the following of our faith practice in the way that we hoped? How are they contributing back? These are some of the elements that are harder to measure. And at the end of the day, we're asking really what is the effectiveness based on what you think the spiritual output is of your community. For some people, it's religious adherence. For others, it's life change. For others, it's a sense of the spiritual impact of God. This could be summarized as belonging, believing, behaving, and the way in which we measure this. What we want to bring up to you as we're on this property strategy course is realizing you may be facing the decision for a development or a community hub project, but actually all of these bottom lines are coming together as you make decisions. And if you can be better at talking about your objectives, understanding that in some ways, probably all of these bottom lines are going to matter at a certain point. If you can become good at talking about them, you will make good decisions.
And what if, instead of separating the spiritual, what if, which again we often do, what if we looked at all the bottom lines as spiritual? Environmental is spiritual. The social impact, justice, living into those who are marginalized within our communities, providing space and opportunity for those in our community to bump into one another and build community and sense of belonging and connection. That is spiritual.
And this is what Alan Hirsch, in his book released this year called Metanoia, which has become one of my favorite books. He talks about metanoia throughout the Bible, which we often translate as repentance. Alan Hirsch reinterprets the concept to understand our paradigms and try to have them reset, to get above to get above our understanding. This, in a sense, is where the spiritual argument also now gets into the debate, the distance between, let's say, a traditional faith community, perhaps at the end of a number of long chapters of service to a community, and those who find themselves outside of that faith community, in the neighborhood. There's often debate of the neighborhood saying, we're way more spiritual than you, church, and the church saying, we don't think you are correctly spiritual. In fact, both are being spiritual, both are wrestling for this metanoia, this sense of trying to come above the current narrative, which during the pandemic, we've all have, isn't it the case? We've all become aware of the extent to which we're stuck in some of our old ways. So here we are in this property strategy course, Dave. We're getting into the deep stuff of change here, right?
Yes, we are.
One of the things that we have been exploring a lot, and we want to share with you in this session, is this question. If we put to you this phrase, the church is going through a once in 500 year operating system revolution.
It's huge.
To what extent you get excited about that?
Yeah, and I think we
Right?
should just say that again. The church is going through a
Yeah.
once in
Yeah.
500 year
Yeah.
operating revolution.
Yeah.
It's not, and there's no going back.
Well, and this is where
there's a change that's tangibly happening.
it's revolution.
It's revolution.
Right. Now, some people, as we've been talking about a lot, some people, as soon as we say that, they say, thank God, thank you for saying that.
Right.
Every night I go to bed, I'm on the board of this church. I'm Jeff, I'm Jane. I'm Jeff, I'm Jane. Get me out of here. I'm a celebrity. You're thinking, why did I do this?
Yes.
Well, this thing is going through massive change. You might start to do some church history and say, the first 300 and almost 400 years, underground movement.
Right.
400 years to the Great Schism, it's Roman Empire. The development of Islam begins to come out at this time. You have the separation of the church leading eventually east and west at around 1000 AD, and then you get to the Reformation 500 years ago.
Yep.
Now, 500 years to now, and perhaps we look back to the Second World War, we have a huge chapter in the world and in the church and other faith communities, certainly the other Abrahamic faiths, they track along this. So from that time until now, is it possible that the model that, frankly, as an Anglican priest, I'll tell you, sometimes many of our churches are dressed up like 16th century Englishmen.
Right.
And then we talk about decolonization.
Right.
We have Indian people like me, black people dressing like 16th century Englishmen, and they're a priest in Nigeria. And you think, this doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense to many of the people who are watching the church. What if we say there is a revolution of the operating system model, yet we hold this property, right? Some people love this, don't they?
Yeah, so there is a shift.
Some people hate it, though. Don't
They hate it. Well, again, there is.
I wish we didn't say that.
Alongside that shift is a decolonizing. Alongside that shift is an undoing of harms in which we need to own of the last 500 years. So there is pain involved in the shift. It's not just this, oh yeah, wow, the shift, but there's a sitting in the tension of look at what we've done as a colonizing entity. And there's also good. So it's a tension. It's not either or. There is this reality of both sitting in tension together.
And as we look at the previous operating system revolutions, just of the Christian church for a moment, many good things came out of every time.
There is.
So if we look at this and say, this could be an amazing time for the church. Yet what we see when we're talking about property strategy is that this debate is happening in a compound way around the way a church board is dealing with a development option or a community hub tenant. This is actually, this deep conversation is actually playing out. When somebody says, please will you sing the same songs that I love and wear the robes in the choir that I love, and please will you do that until the day that I die. And on the day that I die, please will you promise to sing the songs the way that I love it. If only you would do that, I could accept the rest of the changes that I know are coming. If we could be honest about that. Instead, though, very often we get, church boards people get aggressive with each other over this question. So one is the crazy bottom lines. One is this the case? Are we facing a once in 500 year revolution? Is it metanoia in that way?
And if it is, then what is shifting?
Exactly.
Because our bottom lines are going to shift. If the scorecard is changing, so are the bottom lines.
The second of the crazy bottom lines, which you may resonate with, is simply put as the biblical concept of Jubilee. Jubilee arrives around Leviticus chapter 25 in the Old Testament. Our reading of the Old Testament is that this part of the Bible is incredibly rich with guidance about what to do about land. The journey from creation through to very bad cities, through to eventually the giving of the law, which doesn't work, and into wilderness, and back into the promised land, comes with an assignment of land. And by Leviticus 25, we start having instructions on how that land, once it's been traded and used and invested in families, needs to return, according to the Old Testament, to the communities that God originally intended it for it to go to. Now, hold on for a second, because this is the crazy bottom line. As you work into this,
incredible.
We know this from the Christmas Advent readings. We know it from the Gospel of Luke as the year of the Lord's favor. The year where that land is supposed to return to original communities. It's the year of the Lord's favor. Is it supposed to happen every 7 years or every 50 years? There are different explanations of it in different parts of the Bible. But isn't it the case we'd all love to be around on the year of the Lord's favor? That's going to be a good year, right? We're excited about that.
Yeah, so again, the question is, who's excited?
Yeah.
And I think if you are the one who is the landowner in a privileged and a power position, you're going, no, I don't get excited about that because there's something I'm losing.
I have to give it away.
So you now have churches who are saying, this is what's happening. There is a shift going on. I think it is Jubilee.
Yes.
But who is this most exciting for? It's those who don't have. So as we shared the story in a previous episode of Black, Indigenous, female, queer communities are now coming into spaces in which they have not been allowed to enter. What if giving back actually is an empowering those on the ground in our communities who are hoping that they could have voice, have space?
So here's an encouragement to those who say, I think Dave's right, but I'm really scared when he says that. Could we have kind of semi-jubilee where we give away some of our power? Well, in fact, the good news is that's really been the story of Jubilee throughout the story of God's people, is they never really got it.
Yeah,
we never really got it. We've always tried to hold on to something. And we're not suggesting that every faith community simply give away its property. In some ways, that might be unhelpful for the development of communities. What we are talking about on that bottom line is the idea and the question which you might get from your child or your neighbor. They might push you and say, hey, Jeff, hey, Jane, what difference are you really making?
Yeah.
And as we look at companies who are doing much more training on diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're looking at environmental, social, governance impact of the way in which companies work. They're pushing. People are pushing right now. Society is pushing. And if we go back to the spiritual impact, another two categories there are evangelism and discipleship. Right. For those of you who are listening who may not be comfortable calling yourself Christians, and that may be many of you, you may say, I don't even like those terms. In a sense, evangelism is saying we have a certain view of looking at good news from our Creator. We'd like you to be involved in it and engage in it. So any faith community that doesn't have some way of talking about that is, in a sense, not doing its job. The second is discipleship, of how do we then live out into that decision. If you look at those who are leading in communities right now, you'll see that they have a belief system. And they have a way that they would like to see the world work out. They have a kind of evangelism and discipleship. In a sense, then, what we are suggesting is that if you look at the decisions you're making and you realize really what we're being tested on is to what extent have we brought people into this good news of Jubilee, that our properties are going to be part of a reset of society for our generation. We're going to see something of the year of the Lord's favor just because of the decisions we make. So that's the second crazy bottom line, right? And the third one is the simplest, and we'll leave you with this, and you'll go out into your groups in a minute. But it's simply this: placemaking. You steward a place. That's why you're here.
It's massive.
What is that place going to do in the future? To what extent have you done that? And can you make that place on your own? If you could, it's unlikely you would be on this course.
Well, I think
you probably need help, right?
I think what happens with placemaking is we live with a cultural narrative that pushes us above place, meaning that many of you, when you think about church and church land, you're a tourist for an hour and a half on a Sunday morning in someone else's neighborhood. Wow. You come in, you drive in, you get in your car, you drive out. There's no sense of this is my place. I'm just attending an event. So I think placemaking, if you think of linking Jubilee, the result of Jubilee becomes placemaking.
Wow.
Where there's a moving back into the land, a digging in the soil, an understanding of who's here now, because I guarantee you, your neighborhoods have changed. There are more diverse people within the neighborhood itself who share story and narrative. It's different than the German neighborhood it once was, or the Italian neighborhood. There's now this diversity that's mixing together. And I think placemaking starts with healing. We have a friend of ours, she's become a friend of ours, Grandmother's Voices, and they have these female Indigenous elders are providing healing of the soil in our communities, because if we don't heal the narrative within our communities, we can't placemake together.
Yes.
So it's not just coming in and going, what do you want? Let's do food trucks here. Or let's have a park over here. No one's going to connect because we are so isolated, independent. We need to come in to understand ways in which we be community again.
So Jeff or Jane at this point is saying, this is hard. I just
Well, you
wanted
can't
to
do it.
I
You
wanted to
can't
make
do
a
it, Lord.
property decision. You know, we had a bit of land, let's develop it. This is, you know, they'll tell us that they took an MBA and they learned how to make things simple.
Right.
So we want to do that.
Yeah.
We also want to help them understand
It's hard work.
this is hard work.
It's hard work.
And so to try to simplify it and summarize this session and leave you into the time where you're going to ask these questions for yourself, we want you to ask, what are the simple bottom lines that you really care about?
Yeah.
Are you, and by the way, we don't want to malign any accountants. We know a lot of accountants who care just as deeply for all of the bottom lines. But perhaps you're a person who says, the financial bottom line at the end of the day needs to be the first bottom line. Perhaps that's you. Perhaps you say, no, frankly, we own this property. The only thing that matters is our environmental impact, or our social impact, or our spiritual or our kingdom impact, or our impact on placemaking, on our sense of having accomplished Jubilee, or this idea that we want to make sure we're on the right side of, if there is a major operating system change happening, what is it? So we would like to encourage you now to take a few moments on your own, write down in order the types of priorities that you have. Then come together with others on your board and compare your notes and realize that you are a wonderful team of people with diverse views. And if you could be more aware of those views, you will be better prepared for the decisions that are ahead.